What about the engineering solutions that we've heard about to solve some of the problems we have? Are they dubious?
It's really interesting because as a scientist, I would like to be open and listen to new ideas. I think our problem is it's easy to be closed and say, no, that's wrong. But we went through and we listened to a lot of those. I had project money from an organization called Baltic Sea 2020, and we ran a series of workshops. We brought 60 scientists from around the Baltic Sea and from internationally to Sweden to carry out an assessment over a year period. And basically, we found there's no silver bullet. There's no one solution that's going to fix everything. In fact, most of the things that have been suggested will cost tremendous amounts of money and probably will not work for a whole variety of different reasons.
So would you put up some mechanism to judge them, or do you use your intellect?
We did two different ways, and one of it is called expert opinion, where you put a bunch of people together and you talk about it. And the other one we did was we used models. We used mathematical approximations of what happens in the Baltic Sea. And then we tested these models doing model experiments, if you will, where we gave the model certain constraints to see what answers it would come up with.
One project which caught my attention as a complete amateur was using wind turbines to aerate the water, bring oxygen into the water. Is that feasible?
It sounds really cool, and scientifically, it actually is one of the ones that has the highest potential of working, where you take deeper waters and bring them up and let them go, and they're heavier and they sink and they bring oxygen into the intermediate levels. But there's a whole host of scientific questions like, will it change the circulation of the Baltic? How will it affect cod reproduction? A number of things that really need to be addressed before that could be done. And then your other question is it feasible? Can you imagine having 250 wind turbines floating in the Baltic Sea, and each of them pumping water around? I think that the feasibility of that is probably not very high.
No, I can imagine 250 stationary ones, but not.
Oh, they're stationary.
Okay, well, because
but still they have to be located in deep waters.
Yes,
they have to be located above the hypoxic areas, so you can't necessarily anchor them at the shoreline.
No.
And bring power lines out.
But it's still feasible.
It's still feasible.
If you want to spend the money, yes.
Absolutely.
How does the wind turbine and the electricity industry look upon that?
That's a good question. 250 wind turbines is a lot of energy that can be produced, and you think how much energy that could be produced if it was based on land-based sources. But the problem with having it out in the sea is that the storage and uses becomes a problem. So they can't necessarily use these and store the energy and send it back to land.
Okay. Going back to agriculture, being one area, how great a change should we expect in our lives to remedy the Baltic Sea situation?
How great of a change in agriculture?
No, in our lives, because
of
changes to agriculture and so forth.
I think that we can have a better standing of living than we have today and change the way that we live and have a better environment. I think that there are things that have to change. I mean, as an environmentalist, one of the things you say is you reduce, you reuse, and you recycle. So you reduce the natural resources that you consume, you reuse those that you can, and those that you can't, then you try and recycle them so that they can be used further.
Do you think we can do the same amount of farming on a smaller area?
We can do it much more efficiently. There's a lot of agricultural areas that are kept in production for cultural reasons. And people want an open landscape. People want to have agriculture around them. If you look at it cold and cruel, they actually do little to provide food. But there are ways of making these areas more productive and limiting the footprint of agriculture. And probably one of the biggest ways is controlling the amount of fertilizer you use. So you're using only really the amount that's needed so that a smaller fraction of it runs off into the sea. And probably the biggest thing is to control the large animal facilities that create really lots of waste from industrialized pig farms and chicken farms.
So we shouldn't eat as much meat, possibly.
You should become a vegetarian.
Are you a
It's better
vegetarian?
for your
Are you vegetarian?
I'm almost a vegetarian,
Okay.
but I do occasionally eat meat.
Yes, but I mean, you still have to be sure you get all the proteins and vitamins and minerals that you need.
Yeah, but you can get most of it through other sources as well. So
Okay, if you're looking at things like the coming Nord Stream pipeline, how will the construction of that affect the Baltic? Do you really think?
I really don't know so much about that. I know they're putting this pipeline in. I think there's the potential to disturb the bottom initially when they put the pipeline in, and that's always a concern. But I think I'm probably more concerned if they were shipping natural gas and the tankers were going up and down the Baltic.
Which they do anyway.
Which
already.
they do anyway.
Yes.
So I don't know if one is necessarily better than the other. But I mean, the impacts of the pipeline will come primarily when they're building it, and not necessarily once it's operating. It's not like having a pipeline on land. As far as we know, we're not hindering the movement of animals and these kinds of things that make pipelines not very welcome.
Do you think we're spending enough money on improving the Baltic Sea? Or are we using the money incorrectly, perhaps?
Yeah, I think it's partly both, but I think that we need to be much more efficient on how we use the money. Right now we have something called the Common Agricultural Policy that encourages farmers to grow things, and we can use the Common Agricultural Policy to actually fund things that are good for the environment. And I think that's the challenge, is trying to do both of them so that we can live in a sustainable society, so that we can grow crops, we can eat well and live well, and still not destroy the environment in the process.
When you look at the 13 countries around the Baltic, or those that are in the Baltic catchment area, not all of them are in the EU. Should there still be one environmental legislation that is common for all of those countries?
Well, the good thing, the countries that aren't in the EU, and I suppose you're particularly referring to Russia, they're part of many of the agreements that are made on the Baltic Sea. It's one of the fabulous things about the Baltic Sea with the Helsinki Commission and the years of work they've done in working together to ensure that monitoring is done in an organized way. People are using the same methodologies. People are compiling data in the same way. So it's a very positive thing that we have groups like HELCOM around that are helping to keep, even though economically Russia is not part of the EU, but environmentally we hope that they will also follow the same initiatives that we're following to improve the Baltic Sea.
Okay. Daniel Colney, thank you much indeed. This is Michael de Laine for the Copenhagen Voice.